Today on Junkyard Digs, we're going to show you how for $900 you can change your car from this to this. Let's get her going. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special episode of Junkyard Digs. Today, in a nutshell, we have Angus's 1980 Z28 Camaro with its clapped out stock suspension, a whole entire autocross track, and the goal to teach you guys how to make your car handle for a very affordable price using quality products. Angus, what have we here?
A bunch of garbage.
So this is your 1980 Z28 Camaro that sat for...
I think it was 20 years, the man said, that I bought it from.
Had a seized motor, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much a dumpster fire under here, but actually the rest of it is too. The body's not terrible.
It's not good either.
It's a T-top 4-speed car with a 350 Chevy, so that's the big stuff. This is what we're starting with. Yes, we do have clapped out shocks, but most of the stuff we work on does have clapped out shocks. So we're gonna have a pretty extreme example of exactly what a set of shocks will do for a car. And to better exemplify the exact effects of that, we're going to use the aforementioned autocross behind us to show you some before and after results. And we're gonna be doing all of this in a parking lot with nothing more than a floor jack and a couple hand tools to show you exactly how easy it is to do for yourself. So, without further ado, let's go set some base times and see exactly what this car is all about. All right, before we dig into the science of suspension, we need to set a test run, a control, if you will, and see what the Camaro can put down on the autocross in factory clapped out form. As the Camaro clambers its way off to a sweeping big left turn to start things off, you can see that suspension is absolutely all over the place. And if we take a closer look, you can see it literally has crushed the bump stop. It's there so often. In this back straight, Angus puts the power on. Note how much the suspension lifts in the front end. As he makes his way towards the chicane, he's hard on the brakes, the nose takes a dive, and then watch as he comes through the chicanes, these control arms are just absolutely all over the place. Back on the brakes, nose takes a dive, hard left into a long turn which leads into a chicane, tires absolutely squealing, tons of body roll in this car. You can literally see the center of gravity being tossed side to side as it comes through these chicanes. Either way, Angus is hard on the brakes, he comes to the last hard right turn and then gives it all 100 and whatever horsepower that Camaro has left and finishes his control run with a 63.66. Not nearly as bad as we anticipated, but we have a lot of room for improvement. You didn't fall off the track, stayed on track the whole time?
Yeah, and I just barely stayed in my seat. So there's two seat belts holding in it, as it turns out, and they're both on the inside, so every time I turned left, I went...
Clearly, we can see going through the turns there, you had a lot of sway, a lot of literally bouncing out of the corners, yep. Which is exactly what we are going to fix. Let's go find ourselves some basic tools, a shade tree, and some QA1 suspension parts, and talk about what the minimum is you guys need to do to make a car handle completely different. Seeing that it was like 103 outside, we actually decided to wait until that evening to put the shocks on at Mook's Folks Place. By the way, if you guys are near Minnesota, I highly suggest checking out the Street Machines Summer Nationals event. They have a great car show, a dyno, and of course the QA1 autocross, which we like to take the Le Mans to put a show on between sessions.
Looks like liking that out there? We're getting the tires. We'll buy more.
After a full day of burning tires and meeting fans, we headed home to start the work on the Camaro. So obviously, there's other aspects that you should consider besides performance in race scenarios or autocross scenarios or any of that really. Most of that is where your car will spend its time driving every day down the road.
Swerving for dogs,
swerving
pedestrians.
Swerving for dogs and pedestrians. So with that being said, if you're building a car that you want to handle well, you want to be able to ride in it comfortably each day and see performance gains in just normal driving, not just race scenarios. So let's go get some baseline normal driving around town here.
Well, it's very soft, I'll tell you that much.
All right, here we go. We're coming up on a right turn.
Looks like right only.
She leans, but once that compresses all the way, it does pretty good. It puts weight on that outside tire and it handles around the corner good. The inefficiencies that yep, there they are, I'm feeling it right now, is that we are flying side to side instead of transitioning our weight side to side, which is where our shocks are going to make the biggest difference, even in just driving through these suburban side roads right now.
Yeah, these roads are too nice.
Yeah,
This is Minnesota I know and love.
This is the mansion area.
Well, we're keeping the property values reasonable.
Y'all are welcome for not having to pay a little more taxes this year.
Yes.
All right, pretend that's a pothole. Go around it. Oh no! Yep, you can feel it upset itself to the left and then resettle back to the right. Let's go fix that, eh? Oh, here, try a heavy stop.
Well, the brakes work.
Good brakes. Well done, sir.
I don't know if you can see it on camera, but the whole thing goes.
That is another great point, is your braking ability is actually reduced by your car tossing forward. And once again, it's just lightening your tire contact patch and stuff in the rear. And it will tend to throw your ass out if you're not careful. All right, give us a bit of a wiggle here for a baseline from the inside. Okay, yep. A big serpentine, a body roll wiggle. She does pretty good. You can feel it upsetting its own geometry a little bit. And probably any video of the car from underneath will tell us that we can drastically improve upon that. So let's go do that and tell you what we're going to do and why it matters. So as you know, we have a sponsor for suspension for the channel, and there's a lot of suspension companies, but if you ask me, there's really only one answer. The best in the business, the ones that have been there the longest, and the ones that are made 100% right here in America. That's right, you guessed it, QA1 suspension. And for this car, we have ourselves a set of double adjustables for the rear and a set of double adjustable coilovers for the front. Now, I know I said $900 and these are a touch, and I mean a touch over $900, but they're still very affordable, especially when they are literally the best in the business. These are not some like cheap random coilovers that we're throwing on this car. These are literally QA1, and this is how affordable they are. Now that may be surprising to some of you, because usually when you look up suspension components for a car or a whole suspension system for a car, it has a sizable price tag next to it, usually a couple grand or more. However, in most cases, that is the whole suspension kit, be it stage 1 through 3 for the car. Today, we're doing just shocks, and let me tell you why. This next sentence is something that the marketing team at mostly any suspension company is not going to tell you. However, I will say the marketing team at QA1 will actually tell you this. Shocks are hands down the biggest bang for your buck. I'd say they're 70 to 80% of the suspension performance of a vehicle. Now you can get lower and upper control arms for the rear, all sorts of different stuff to change geometries a little bit, but for the most part, the suspension is all about controlling the transfer of weight when going into a turn or around a corner, and all of that is done by the shocks. And that is what makes shocks the biggest bang for the buck under your vehicle. They're doing the most work to make the most use out of the contact patch that your tires have on the ground, because all of this comes down to tires. So there's actually a little bit of misconception that I had in my mind that I want to clear, just in case you guys might think the same thing, because chances are you've probably seen the same marketing or magazine articles or videos that made me think this. The ability of a car to go around a corner does not come from suspension. It's all about tires and making that tire work most efficiently for the vehicle they're on and the purpose it is intended to do. Now I'm going to get more into this, but essentially the better your suspension utilizes the tire, the better your car is going to handle. To understand this, let's back way up. Let's forget about the Camaro entirely and imagine that we had a large 3,500 pound go-kart the size of a car. Imagine that there is no springs, there's no shocks, it is spindles welded straight to a frame. When it sits on the ground, all 4 tires are on the ground. If you drive over a pothole, that tire just hangs in the air because it is statically mounted with a solid frame. Now let's take this giant go-kart to an autocross or even down the street and go drive around. As we are carving turns in this car, all 4 tires are going to be perfectly planted on the ground, and our center of gravity is going to stay in the vehicle's center. It's not going to sway side to side as it leans around a turn. It's going to stay right there. As far as tire contact in all 4 corners, this is a perfect scenario. But obviously it's not realistic because, I don't know if you've ever been to Illinois, but you would die if you tried to drive one of those through Illinois. On top of the ride quality, there's actually a huge advantage to loading weight onto the outside tires of a turn. The more weight you put on a tire, the more traction that tire will have, because those tires have more to give. In fact, tire companies have whole dynagraphs of weight to traction that they don't share intentionally, but it is absolutely a thing, a construct of tire creation, is that the more weight you add to the tire, to an extent, the more traction it has. So let's take our big go-kart and give it the ability to have body roll. Now we are able to transfer that weight, that center of gravity, over towards one side as we roll. And what that's doing is loading the tires on that side. And as we put more weight on those tires, they get more grip and we can make that turn harder. Seems like an ideal situation, right? It is, except that there is a point you can no longer put any more weight on the tire for it to remain efficient and effective at creating traction. So once you hit that equilibrial point of that tire is no longer effective and you lose traction and get oversteer or understeer depending on what the exact scenario is. So hopefully, as you can tell, where I'm going with this is ideally we have a suspension system that keeps all 4 tires planted on the ground as much as possible all the time, yet allows for body roll to load the outside tires when turning, but not too much. We want to load it just right to that peak point of traction, and use absolutely every little bit of that tire you paid for to make it around that turn. And that is what shocks do. Shocks control the rate at which motion moves from side to side in a car. It controls how fast that center of gravity tosses from side to side, versus no shocks where you got this going on, versus a nice set of shocks with good rebound and compression where you can slowly transfer the weight to the tires that need it. Quick edit right there. I should not have said slowly. I should have said in a linear, smooth, and controlled fashion. These changes can still happen quickly. It's all about controlling them and not letting them over center or put too much weight on that tire and break traction. And that is why I say that shocks are going to be the biggest bang for your buck for road feel and performance from a stock configuration, which is exactly what we were aiming to do today, is just step this car up enough to handle pretty damn good. Now, just because I said shocks do most of the work, that does not mean they do all the work. There is a reason, a very good reason, companies like QA1 make aftermarket control arms and aftermarket suspension pieces for rear ends and stuff like that. It's because of the changes in geometry. From the factory, a car is set up with about 2 to 4 degrees of camber in the front end. They're actually set up to intentionally understeer. Understeer is a lot easier to naturally figure it out with just reflexes than oversteer. Now this is done because only a very small percentage of people who drive cars, I'm talking like 3%, are actually car people and understand exactly what the hell's going on when they turn a wheel. We're the 3%. We can understand what's happening in a car, and we know weight transfers, and you can feel how a car drives, so you have the ability to get more out of that vehicle than the factory intended it for. We car people can absolutely utilize the remaining performance the factory intentionally left out of their suspension systems. And that is where control arms come in. With a set of control arms for this car, we will now see 6 to 8 degrees of caster up front, and we will change our control arms from sitting at an angle like this, which once again, designed to induce understeer, to actually something more like this, or it completely depends on what car you have. But the point is, your ball length, rod ends change, your control arm pitches change. It's all about, once again, keeping that tire flat on the ground while it is in motion. Do you need to spend $3,500 and buy the whole damn thing at once? No. Just go buy a set of shocks, throw them on the car. See if that's all you need. See if you actually want more. And if you do, go get control arms. So there you go. That is suspension. It is literally all about keeping your little contact patch that your tire has, which I shit you not, is about that big, on the ground, level, not just half of it on the ground, but the whole thing planted on the ground squarely the entire time you're going through any type of turn, bump, anything. That is why you buy aftermarket suspension components. So with all that being said, I think these guys have pizza. We're gonna go eat that quick, and then we're gonna rip the shocks off this, put the QA1 stuff on, and do a little before-after comparison. So let's get to it. All right, so looking at our suspension here up front, we have our upper control arm, our upper ball joint, our spindle, which is everything, yep, holding that right there. You can actually see the back of it right there, that vertical piece. Our sway bar link, which There's a gap.
I wouldn't worry about that little guy.
Our tie rod, our lower control arm, our shock and coil spring. And what we're going to be doing today is popping one of our ball joints off, letting our lower control arm down, and then removing the coil spring and putting the new shock and coilover in place. Now, like I may have said earlier, we are running the double adjustable shocks, which are the high-end street performance shock, but you can get single adjustables for your application. You can also get just shocks. We are doing a coilover conversion up front, but I think that's literally only like 150 bucks. So yeah, totally worth it if you ask us. So yeah, let's get into this and pop our upper ball joints off and show you exactly what we're doing. All right, step one for removing our shock.
Find your cotter pin.
Yep, he's gonna dig in here, find his cotter pin, and remove that from the castle nut on the upper ball joint.
Not to panic, but I can't find it.
In some cases, it may have rusted off or someone removed it. Can't tell, some cases is our case currently. Right, Luke? Yeah. Once that cotter pin's out of the way, we're gonna throw a floor jack under the lower control arm for safety. Once our floor jack is in place, we can safely go ahead and loosen the upper ball joint nut. Now you want to loosen it just a bit so you still have some threads protruding. The reason we're doing that and have the floor jack here is because all the weight of that coil spring is held between these two control arms, because this keeps the car off the ground. So as soon as we release that, this is going to shoot to the ground with only the internals of the shock and the sway bar holding it in place. And we trust neither of those and don't really want to die today.
Speak for yourself.
I don't want to die.
Once you have your upper nut loosened but not all the way off, go ahead and strike the spindle right here with a hammer to release the tension in that conical shaped part of the ball joint, and hopefully let everything fall nice and happily. There we go. At this point, make sure your jack has enough weight on it to hold the pressure of that spring, and then remove your upper ball joint nut the rest of the way. Once that nut is off, you can go ahead and lower your lower control arm a good bit. Oh.
Don't be afraid. It's more afraid of you than you are of it.
Best way to get these sway bar links off is to go ahead and just get a cutoff wheel and cut them and go down to O'Reilly's and get some new ones, because I don't know if you guys can tell, but there's no way in hell that's ever going to come off. In some cases, such as Angus's, if you have a short hose, you'll have to take your caliper off if you remove the upper. I like to remove the upper because it gives me just a little more room to get in here without a spindle hanging in my face. Once all this is off, you can go ahead and remove your shock bolts and get that shock out, because that's the last thing holding all your spring tension on. Make sure your floor jack's in there, and then we'll drop everything out, pull our spring out, and clean everything up a little bit.
So you may notice I've got a vice grip on our old shock. That's because typically, if a shock's been on a car for more than 10 minutes, you go to loosen the upper nut, it'll just spin the entire shaft of the doohickey.
The rod of the shock.
The shock rod. The rod shock.
All right, now that our shock upper bolt is off, go ahead, Mr. Gus.
All right. It's been nice knowing you.
Oh, she's coming. All right, now we're just gonna get the bottom bolts out for the shock. I'm gonna pull that spring right out. Once your spring is out, kick your control arm. Make sure it's hanging all the way down so there's no more pressure here. Kick it, and your spring will lose its arch and kick out a little bit like this. And then you just throw a breaker bar under it to compress it, and it'll roll out. And our old coil spring is out of the way. We'll vacuum this up and get ready to install our new stuff. Alright, even though we've done this on multiple cars by now, I still like to sit down and read through the instructions in case there's anything specific. And there is a few specific things per application. If you ever have any questions, call QO1's tech line. They are awesome. Here we have the big beast itself. This is their double adjustable coilover front shock for the 1980 Camaro. We have a compression and a rebound setting. I think we know about 3 to 5 compression and 8 to 12 rebound for today. Might crank it up for the autocross tomorrow. The best thing about these is you can set both your values pretty low and drive down the road in a nice comfortable ride, and then simply crawl under the car and go click 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 with their 18 settings of adjustability, and then have an absolute rocket ship of a handling machine in about 60 seconds. This is our coil spring. We have these two collars that we will be putting on the shock body. Make sure you put a bunch of anti-seize on the body itself, on these threads. Never grab these with anything but the intended tools. Do not grab them with a channel locks, because you will crush them out of round and they will seize onto these threads. Two things I do like to order alongside our standard coilover kits that do not come with but make life a lot easier is this guy right here, which is a thrust bearing kit that sits between the shock adjustment section and the coil spring itself and helps with the load. Basically, it's a bearing in between two washers that will sit right here, and then your coil spring and all the weight of the car will sit on top of that, and that just lets that turn. Makes it really easy to crank your car up to height, as well as a spanner wrench. These shocks come with a normal tool that's cast all as one piece, but we just found this guy that you can put on a ratchet to be a lot better for accessibility, to get in there and help tighten those up. So with that being said, let's go ahead and put the shock together. We got our lock ring, run him all the way down, drop on our base plate here, our coil spring, and now we just put that all in the car. One thing I do want to add, remember earlier I was saying a large portion of your performance comes from the shocks themselves. These come out of the box in a stock configuration. This will bolt straight into this car. If you actually order the control arms and stuff to go along with these shocks, you have to actually take these clips off, take everything out, and change this to a different style to fit the QA1 style control arms. So that right there is your physical proof from QA1 out of the box that this is a massive gain in performance by itself for it is set up to go on stock suspension. With that being said, let's do that. Drop our lower washer on, drop our bushing in, hang that in there, sir. So now Angus is going to take our spring and shock assembly, run it up through the hole in the frame, put our upper bushing on, the upper washer.
Get in there, you please.
And then the first of his two jam nuts for the top, just to let that hang. So as Angus tightens this up a little bit, we're going to look up inside and verify that our spring is centered around the retaining cup. There's a big circle up there on the frame to hold that spring in place. We also have a lot of anti-seize on those threads, like I had mentioned, so that'll keep those from galling and getting stuck. Once he gets that spring centered up top, we'll go ahead and bolt our lower bolts on. What are you doing there, buddy?
I needed a towel. My hands are all greasy. I'm ruining the new QA1 stuff. It's got to look good. I'm just being told this all now.
Get him centered up and bolt everything down to torque. Also, by the way, it's not taking us like 6 hours. We just started at like 8. So this has actually been going really smooth, really easy. Either way, it is now time to hook our upper ball joint back up. A little more. And with that, I'm ready to bolt our caliper back down, do a little more adjustment on our ride height once we get the wheel on, and the front of this car is done. We'll see you guys tomorrow for the rear suspension. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
What you doing there?
I'm just putting on some new sway bar end links. We broke the old one, so we're throwing some new ones on.
Hell yeah. And with that, our front suspension is done. We needed to mention that since this was a complete how-to. We are back at the Autocross today, as you can see, and we're going to finish this car up with rear suspension, which should hopefully be pretty straightforward. All right, now for your rear shocks, go ahead and pop your tires off, get them out of your way. You got a bolt right here on the bottom and 2 right up here on top, and it's that easy. Let's get her done. That is quality right there.
It's shockingly bad.
Is that like OEM?
I think so.
Ooh.
This is our final piece of the puzzle.
And a sticker.
Does
And a
come with a
lifetime warranty.
I'm going to put the sticker in a really inconvenient place. Oh.
I do like a good chart.
Charts make things nice for people that actually want to get the most out of their ride and their performance on their vehicle.
And they just like charts. Well, I'm not going to say that went perfect. Once again, the GM side of things failed us and we broke a bolt. So we had to get a little creative and fix all that. But nonetheless, our QA1 shock is in. So let's get this all tightened up and throw Angus out on the course out there and see how he does. Say hi, Steve. This is the guy on the tech line, by the way. All right, so we have our shocks on, and it's finally time to see how this car rides. While we're waiting for our turn on the track, let's do our real-world driving test and see how it is out here. We do have it turned up a little high right now for normal street driving, but still, this should give us a good idea of what we're going to see on the track. And if we don't like it, all we have to do is get out and literally click it down to a lower adjustment setting and have a more comfortable, smooth ride.
This car already feels way more planted.
This is a totally different car. I mean, we've done 3 miles an hour. Okay, here's the big left. I moved out of my seat a little. The car didn't roll at all. Nope. Those shocks are handling the movement of that weight really well. They're transitioning side to side excellently. It's a stiffer ride, but that's what you would expect when you have them turned way up for autocross. And we actually did ride in this a little bit earlier with them set around 5. They're up around 11 on compression right now, and it was like a good ride.
Yeah. Hey, I've got one of those.
All right, leaning. Didn't really even lean.
The only thing that rolled over was me out of this seat.
Exactly.
So we have 2 bolts holding this on.
This is already an incredible difference. I would definitely turn it down for daily riding, but look at this. Some wobbling back and forth. I'm all over the place. I'm trying to keep myself planted. And that's just shocks.
Yep.
This is a set of double adjustables in the rear and a set of coilovers in the front. Like we had mentioned, right now we're using the most of our tires by loading the weight appropriately side to side with what geometry we have as a stock setup. If we were to go the extra mile and change to their aftermarket control arms and linkages and stuff, we would be able to better utilize the tires even further by changing how well they hit the ground and not just how well the load is transferred to them. Looks like we're about ready. Sweet. Let's line her up. All right, it's time to put our money where our mouth is. Let's see how the Camaro does on the autocross with the QA1 suspension. You can tell immediately into the first turn box and around the long left that Angus is instantly more confident in the handling capabilities of this car and is able to pull a lot more performance from his tires because the QA1 shocks are controlling that weight transfer so much better. Into the turn box, perfect example. The car is planted, yet rolls just enough to load those outside tires and absolutely carve around a corner. Down the back straight, the power no longer lifting the front of the car, and we're already into the slalom. I barely have time to talk. Look how much smoother the transition from side to side is in these control arms. This is Angus's first run back on the track, and it's clear he's already picked up time, and he's only 3/4 of the way through. Through the big left-hander back into the second slalom. Let's switch cameras to see exactly how planted that car is through here. Alongside the shocks, the coilovers allowed us to lower the front of the car a little and achieve a better center of gravity. Coming out of the last right-hander, Angus puts it on the floor, grabs second, and comes across the line with a 58.55. That's pretty damn good. How'd it go?
Holy crap, this thing grabbed. I was falling out of my seat. Whoa! That last straightaway was not my friend.
Dude, it was like, yeah. Second, it was like, yeah. All right, let's burn it down, son. Holy crap, he's going for it now. Damn, that thing is planted.
Nice and clean, trying to improve his time. We ran 58. Car ran 63 seconds on Friday. Made a bunch of improvements to it, suspension-wise, maybe a few other things. We're out here to see how well those components have helped this car. I already saw a 5 seconds improvement on his first run. That's a lot of time.
That's, hell yes. How's it feeling?
Aggressive.
You ran a 56. 3 more seconds off, you've taken 10 seconds off your time. You're actually getting close to what most cars run out here, which is like
That's fantastic.
45 to 55. Let's see it, Angus. Buddy, come on. Hell yeah, that's good. 55, 55. You are 4 seconds slower than a 97 Cobra with independent rear suspension.
Huh. Weird. This thing is cutting out bad in the back straights. I think she's getting hot, despite what my temperature gauge says. Because there's no way that's real.
He's got the suspension. He could use some better tires. And he could definitely use a better engine and gear ratio. Gear ratio made a massive difference for this. Oh, hell yeah, dude.
I think you can do it. You're racing it.
.41. 54.41. So far you've taken 8 seconds off your time with like 130 horsepower to do it. Now to those watching, 54 seconds probably doesn't mean a lot because you don't know what most cars are running. So for reference, let's take a look at that.
A little bit bigger. A little bit harder. Oh, there's some call, bud. Here's the
Yeah, despite being a lumbering pile of poop we could barely keep running, the Camaro was doing pretty damn well. Especially if you consider the fact that it was definitely the most underpowered car with the worst gear ratio at the event. This hunk of junk was now putting down lap times only 4 or 5 seconds slower than a number of cars easily 10 times its value. At this point, a rainstorm came through, putting a damper on the autocross, but giving us the perfect reason to take the Le Mans out and burn the rest of the tires off.
Junkyard Digs!
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap for our suspension video on Angus's 1980 Camaro. Hopefully you guys learned something, and hopefully you'll be giving QA1 a call here soon. One thing I do want to throw in there that I have not mentioned yet, they make specific control arms and stuff for specific vehicles, so your vehicle may not be supported. But to quote one of the texts from QA1, you give me the correct measurements and I will put shocks on a bass boat, which was the point. We did a just shock build for this car because shocks can go on basically any car out there. As long as it's not something just super freaking weird that doesn't use conventional direction of shocks.
That's a no. I mean, like the viscous ones in the
like an
really
MG,
old
like
stuff,
a midget.
Not. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, they don't make midget parts. Either way, that's going to be a wrap here for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you learned something. Like I said, thank you to Angus for putting in all the work to get this sucker done. Oh, and also thank you to 2 to Grid for working the autocross, and thank you to QA1 for inviting us up and sponsoring the autocross. We'll see you guys next week. Peace. You ever done autocross before?
No.
This is going great. Let's do it.